I guess.
Oh, okay.
Close to Umsla, I guess. I don't know.
I didn't see that one. Found Natural Bridge today, but I didn't see.
Well, good. Well, welcome to Bother the Father. Again, this is a kind of an open forum. Anyone's allowed to ask any questions, about the faith, otherwise. So the floor is open.
Not that I thought of any questions.
That's okay too. So far, we don't have anyone on the line, but that's all right. Who knows? Yeah, we had some wind come through last night, a little bit of hail, but looks like everything is standing, so nothing damaged from what we see around here.
What's any further news on Catholic Charities and presentation?
Yeah. So for those who don't know, we're discussing with Catholic Charities here in St. Louis about them taking over the site at presentation. So the plan is that they would keep the church as a chapel, which is ideal. That means we wouldn't have to go through the relegation process to reduce the church to what we call profane, but not sordid use. Profane just means like general, right? So when a church is consecrated, specifically an altar, that church is set apart. It's almost like, I kind of equate it to like something like a baptism. So like once you're baptized, you can't remove the character of your soul, right? So once you're baptized, you can't get rid of that mark. Same with when you're confirmed. When you're confirmed, you receive a mark on your soul that can never be removed. Even when someone's ordained, obviously, right? That's the same thing. These sacraments are only given one time. And so when a bishop, which is the authority of the bishop, consecrates a church, meaning they bless the altar, they go through the rite to actually set that whole building apart. The intention is that it's a permanent structure. It stays there until Jesus comes again, right? It's not meant to be reduced. It's going to be there forever. As we've seen with the shifting tides of the church, although this year we've had an increase in people entering, which is wonderful. We've seen shifting populations where parishes, they subsume in other parishes. Those borders are removed. And in the past, what would happen with the church is be automatically what they called reduced. So reduced just means that there's a canonical order from the bishop that says, okay, we consecrated the structure, and now we're removing that consecration to allow the building to be sold, to allow the building to be used for other uses. And here in St. Louis, we've seen some of those churches turned into things like theaters for like plays. One was a skate park, even though that burned down recently, right? So what that allows the parish to do is to sell the church to make a profit, to be used for the goods of the people, and also to kind of maintain the ministries that are going on in the parish, right? So especially if a parish is maybe in financial issues, they could use that money to provide for the needs of the parish. Here at St. Anne, when we had the subsuming of presentation back with All Things New in 2023, and so we were trying to find different uses for the building. The church is still being used because it's still an active church. We have to use the church if it is still not consecrated. I'm sorry, it's still it's still consecrated, being not been reduced. And so, but the question is, can we use the other structures around it for something? And so we've been trying to find ways of using those structures, like the old school. Right now, we're renting out the parish center to a gentleman named Eric Vogel, who's running a catering service out of there. But part of that discussion, as we've seen kind of like efforts flail over the last few years of using the structures there and maybe maintaining it better, we've reached out to Catholic Charities, maybe take it over. And so what that would entail was some kind of an agreement that Catholic Charities would pay St. Anne for the land, for the structures, and then use it to whatever they would want to use it for. And so the discussion has really been focused on using the old school and the rectory as senior housing, senior living. And so that's kind of what we're going forward on in our discussions. Catholic Charities initially reached out to them in October. We have been in communication with one of their representatives who's kind of spearheading the project. Right now, though, we've been told that Catholic Charities is working on another project they're trying to get done. I'm not sure exactly where that is. There's rumor that Our Lady of Guadalupe has been in discussion with Catholic Charities too. And Guadalupe, to be fair, their structure will be able to move into right away because it's hasn't been in a kind of a dilapidated state for the last few years. And so they probably want to get that because that'd be easier to do now, possibly. But I don't know for sure who they're talking to in that regard. But that's kind of where we're at right now. I actually emailed this morning our contact to just see where we're at, and just ask if there's anything we can do on our end to kind of help. So I'm waiting to hear back from him. But yeah, that's kind of where we're at right now. Yeah. So again, there's been some. I am very positive that I think the deal will go through. If that doesn't, our only real option, practically speaking, I think, is to relegate the church and then sell off the property. And we would rather not do that. And part of the reasons why we're trying to avoid that is not so much the fact that the bar to relegate a church is very high, and it is. I mean, so in other words, you can't just say, well, or let me put it this way. Most of this is handled within the local church. So if we were to go to the Archbishop and say, Archbishop, we cannot afford to maintain this building, we can't afford to run it, it's a great financial drain on the parish, and for that reason, we would like to relegate it. He could say, great, I agree, and he could give the decree to do that. The problem would be if anyone were to, let's say, appeal that process. Now, the reason that's sort of a sticky situation is because we've experienced certain things with All Things New that we've never experienced before. And so there's an appeal to the Archbishop, which could happen. And the Archbishop could say, well, no, I've looked at everything and my decision is the same. And then someone could actually appeal to Rome if the Archbishop would say, I'm not going to overturn it. That's where things get interesting because we've seen in just the combining of parishes, we've seen some decisions of the Archbishop get overturned by what they call the Roman Rota, which is like the Supreme Court for the church, right? They're kind of like the last line of judicial body that they represent the Pope himself. So when they decree something, that's like the Pope saying that's how it's going to be. So in that regard, we've seen these appeals get accepted by the Roman Rota for reasons that are kind of outside the traditional reasons that they would overturn those decisions. It used to be that if you had a process and you followed the process, there'd be no grounds for the Roman Rota to actually overturn it. With All Things New, we've seen reasons given by the Roman Rota that were outside the purview of the process. And so that raises some kind of concerns when it comes to relegating the church, because the relegation of a church is a higher bar than just combining parish boundaries. And so what they look at is certain things, not just for financial issues, but even like spiritual issues, which in reality kind of makes a lot of sense because these buildings are established for spiritual needs, for the good of the area, the good of the community. And so to say we're not going to do that anymore, you probably should have a really good reason other than we just can't afford it. Because the answer come back and say, well, what have you done? What can you do? Or what have you tried, right? So recently we've seen a few parishes already submit for relegation. And this is the first time it's happened after All Things New, outside of like a destruction. So we had one recently down in Arnold where there was a tornado that came through back in a couple springs ago, demolished the building, and the other church they had just could not fit everybody. So they decided to relegate the churches and want to build a new one for the entire parish. That's a little different circumstances. Like, yeah, you don't have the building that'll fit. That makes more sense. Recently, just back in February, maybe March, a couple pastors have submitted for relegation. St. Sabina has been submitted to relegate. Also, I can't remember what the other two are. St. Bernadette and St. Matthias down in Lime have been submitted for the same reason. So these are again parishes that have subsumed these churches. They've combined their parish into one parish, and like the case of like St. Mark down in Lime, they have two parishes and they have 5 different churches. And so even if you were to say, well, we have 2 parishes to kind of like help with this, that can be a huge financial burden, right? Especially if you're not using those churches for anything. So they've been submitted to the Archbishop and been accepted to be relegated. Now the question is, though, is there going to be an appeal for any of these locations?
And they allow any parishioner to appeal?
Anyone that lives within the boundary. Or anybody on the roll. So anyone that's considered a parishioner would be anyone within the parish boundary or anyone that's enrolled as a parishioner outside the boundary. And so what that means is you don't necessarily even to be Catholic to submit an appeal. So it's rather interesting in that regard. I think it may have to be baptized, but regardless, to submit an appeal would be a huge thing. And then the question would be, well, if it does go to Rome, what are they going to say? Mm-hmm. So I don't know the situations. I know. I've been to St. Matthias. I've been to St. Bernadette. St. Bernadette actually was a movie theater before it was actually a church. So that would be like, well, that's kind of easy. That was kind of, they were kind of waiting for, there was also an appeal for St. Bernadette from a parochial standpoint that finally came back. So they were waiting on that. St. Matthias, I think that might have been a gym initially. I don't really know for sure. So I imagine the pastor there has looked at all these things and determined, I think we have an airtight case to go to the Roman Rota. And even if they would come back with questions, I think we have answers for them. And so it's not just one reason we're relegating. There's several reasons why that we can actually answer. And that's really, as a pastor, you kind of have to answer for when it comes to the appeal. So that's, if we were to do that with presentation before a submit for relegation, I'd want several reasons, before we would do that. And at this point, I think, if Catholic Charities does not go through, I think that's kind of our last resort, because we have tried other things. We tried bringing other people in to maybe look at it. And it's just no one's really, wanting to use it. And again, I'm personally though speaking, also presentation is a beautiful church, and I would hate to actually do that. But if it was for the good of the parish, so I have to do what's best for the parish. And so I think most pastors would take that tact as well. So, St. Sabina, I don't know. Father Liho over there at St. Ferdinand, they've subsumed St. Sabina. So I imagine he's done the same process and looked at everything and says, we can't really do that. I don't know the history of St. Sabina really much either. I'm not sure if that was there were some churches where like they were initially gyms and they were turning churches later. Mm-hmm. Those are a little bit easier, I think, to kind of relegate because that was not the original intention of the building. Mm-hmm. So you can argue that it's like, well, that was never really what it was supposed to be. So I don't know. It's kind of interesting. And we'll see what happens. So right now, though, we are still in communication. We're just kind of waiting, I think, for this other project to finish. And then we'll be in communication, with Catholic Charities to get our ball rolling. I'm pretty hopeful. I think that, it seemed like there was interest in the building, the structure. Mm-hmm. I did find out recently, though, that apparently this isn't the first time Catholic Charities looked at that structure. Supposedly, I'm not sure exactly how shortly after the school closed, but Catholic Charities is looking at that as sort of I think a transitional home. And I know there was funding that was set up apparently. And again, this is all hearsay. I don't really know for sure. I'm just hearing this from good sources, mm-hmm. which I would trust those sources. And it went by nothing came of it. So I don't know the reason behind that. Mm-hmm. But my intention is to basically keep on going until someone says no, or there's, we can't do it. But again, we also were told that this whole process would be somewhere between 13 and 20 months. So even if we were even we had another meeting right now, we're still only 4 months in. So it's it'll take a little time either way. Yeah. You look, I have a question, Joe. Look, you're in deep thought, about to say something.
I'm not really sure what my question is.
Okay.
Just I think it's easy to sort of know how to celebrate Lent and Advent, but how do you celebrate the Easter season?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's interesting that a lot of the times we look at these seasons of penance, they're shorter than the actual season of celebration, right? I think the exception might be Christmas. Christmas is shorter than Advent typically. But also, if you think of like the history of Christmas actually went all the way till February 2nd, right? So I mean, the Christmas season was much more prolonged before Vatican II, and I think it was shows that we are not so much focused so much on the misery that comes with penance or sacrifice, but on the joy that comes with the celebration of Christ's works. So, how do you celebrate that? Yeah, I think most people would celebrate by indulging into things they give up during Lent, which I think is rather common, which also leads to other spiritual issues like, when is enough enough? Sometimes it's easy to, when indulging these things, to kind of not put a limit on them. I know I have trouble with that, especially in the Easter season and Christmas season. Yeah, I mean, we have these other days liturgically that we can kind of engage with in a deeper way and recognize the action of Jesus. Like, for instance, Divine Mercy Sunday, to pray the Divine Mercy Chaplet on that Sunday seems like a good way to celebrate that Sunday. We just had Good Shepherd Sunday. So this understanding of Christ calling people to lead his church and that he's present in them seems like a good way to celebrate. Oftentimes we also see these great elevations of the sacraments. Like, for instance, our second graders are going to receive First Holy Communion this Sunday, which is a great milestone for them. And so praying for them and recognizing that grace they're about to receive can be very good. It's also no coincidence that oftentimes many dioceses, as a matter of fact, just last week on Good Shepherd Sunday, the Holy Father ordained 10 men to the priesthood. So we see ordinations usually in the springtime that are in the Easter season. We're going to be receiving 5 men at the transitional diaconate on May 9th, which is the sixth Sunday of Easter, or sixth Saturday of Easter. And then we are receiving 1 man into the Holy Priesthood over Memorial Day weekend, right? Which is, I think it's the 23rd this year. It's Saturday, so Pentecost weekend. So I think most of the time the church celebrates more sacramentally because the sacraments come from this resurrection of Jesus. Personally speaking, I mean, I don't know if there's really a bad way to celebrate it. I mean, obviously don't sin. That would be probably a great way to celebrate Easter. But I think there's kind of a relaxation in some ways of some of these practices of penance during the Easter season that we can kind of engage in. Like, for instance, some people might find it common to eat meat on Fridays of Easter. Now, you can. If you wanted to, the church would still dictate you should still do some other form of penance on that day, but maybe you could relax that form of penance during the Easter season. I don't know. That's kind of up to the individual, I suppose. As a matter of fact, they called the Friday of the octave of Easter Meat Friday, because that's one of the Fridays in the octave of Christmas and Easter are days where you should indulge in meat, because you're still celebrating Easter Sunday and Christmas Day.
Basically feast day.
Yeah, you feast on feast days, right? So yeah. I mean, I think that's kind of the way you could. I don't know if there's really a specific answer on that, though.
So is this, with that one priest being ordained,
Mhm.
is that the smallest that it's ever been, or have there been zero sometimes?
No, I think we praise God in the Archdiocese of St. Louis have always had at least one person be ordained. And I think that's gone back at this point several decades. Even where priesthood vocations were diminished, I think every year in the Archdiocese we just had one person get ordained. Now, those people may not be young. So, for instance, the last couple of years we've had several men who are permanent deacons get ordained to the priesthood, and some of them were in their 50s. Father Hanekas, who was just ordained last year, I think he was in his late 60s. So sure, if God's calling you, God's calling you. Guys from Kenrick, though, they're like last year we didn't have anyone from Kenrick. So 'cause Father Hanekas went to another seminary.
Okay.
Because he was older, which makes sense. But no, we've had at least one person ordained every year, as far as I know. Going back at least to Vatican II, and I imagine even earlier, because earlier in the Vatican II we did have a lot of priesthood vocations.
So does every archdiocese have a seminary?
No, as a matter of fact, majority of them don't.
Okay.
So some might have. You have more maybe minor seminaries, which are like the high school seminary is kind of gone by the wayside at this point. I don't know if any dioceses in the United States now other places may have those, but in the United States, I can't think of anyone that has a high school seminary.
Okay.
Many of them have what they call minor seminaries, like college. But to have a major seminary is very rare, and you can probably count on two hands the amount of major seminaries there are in the continental United States. Yeah, maybe a little more, but I mean it's definitely not more than 25.
Okay.
So usually, what happens with those is they become more regional. So Kenrick, for instance, the major seminary here in St. Louis, it ministers to not only the men of St. Louis, but also Jeff City, Kansas City, Kansas City, Missouri, I think Tyler, Texas. They've been expanding more and more in other dioceses. Louisiana sends men, Indiana. Yeah. Now the closest one geographically would probably be Mundelein in Chicago.
Okay.
And then there's also Meinrad Abbey in Indiana.
What about Conception?
Conception actually is a minor seminary, so they don't do theology programs.
Oh, okay.
It's just philosophy only.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so many of the seminaries. I mean, they get a little more clustered in the Northeast, right? I mean, there's like 4 or 5 of them up there.
Okay.
The South has a few more established now. There's maybe like 3 in the South. So as you get farther west, like around California, I think they have probably 2 out there. But yeah, it's kind of sparse. I mean, like if you're going farther west, probably the closest one after us, after Kenrick, probably won't be until Colorado's not a major seminary. Yeah, probably California.
Okay.
I mean, so you're getting out there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah.
I know a lot of the seminarians that we've had staying at the parish different times have been from out of state or
Yeah. I mean, part of that's just because the number of seminaries from St. Louis has decreased. So, and it's hard because you look at that poster from St. Louis. What you really have to look at, and they've changed. So, seminary formation is dictated through what they call the Program for Priestly Formation. And that initially was started by John Paul II in his document Pastores Dabo Vobis, I will give you shepherds. And for the first time ever, there was a unified approach to seminary formation. So some people are like, wait a minute. Well, that's kind of weird, right? Because we've had seminaries for millennia at this point. Are you saying that this is 1997 was the first time that all those seminaries have been under the same kind of direction of formation? And the answer to that is yes. So what John Paul II was established was what they call it's been called different things, 4 pillars, 4 dimensions over time of seminary formation. And at the root of the seminary formation is the spiritual formation. So your internal life. From that comes human formation. So who are you as an individual? Can you function as a person? Intellectual formation. So, what are you learning? And then the capstone of it is pastoral formation. How are you applying these things in ministry to God's people? It wasn't until 1997 until that actually was established as a unified way of approach to formation. And so before that, you've had seminaries, and which is why also we've probably had some problems in seminaries of people doing different things. So yeah, it's rather interesting when you look at that. So they've changed it recently instead of like guys in college or pre-theology, theology. Now they have terms like discipleship and formation. So my understanding is discipleship is still kind of the college program, and formation is considered the theology program. I'm not sure exactly where pre-theology falls in all that. One thing also they added recently was what they call a propedeutic year. So a propedeutic year is sort of like a formative year where it's kind of directed towards the internal life, the spiritual direction, the spiritual formation. So here at Kenrick, apparently, the way they've implemented that was your first year, they kind of take your phones and your computers away, and they only let you use them at certain times. And there's things like seminars and more intense prayer, which phenomenal. I mean, I think that's great that's where they're approaching that. The other thing they're adding is a pastoral year further in formation. That's mandatory. So guys will step out of formation at the seminary and actually live in a parish and do certain ministries within the parish. And that's usually close to their ordination at the diaconate. Usually what happens with guys, they'll go on their pastoral year right before they enter the 3rd year of theology, which is the year they're going to be ordained. And so they'll come back from that year, then finish up a year of academic challenge, then be ordained at the diaconate. Kenrick also just this year started a process where the deacons, they'll be ordained. They only have one more semester. So our deacons recently just graduated back in December, and Kenrick has done that before. There's been a precedent for that at Kenrick in the previous years, where men would graduate in December and then spend some time in a parish ministering as a deacon, and then be ordained the diaconate the following May or whenever it is. So I'm actually kind of glad to see that, because I think that's very helpful for the deacons. So I say all that because when you look at the poster for the archdiocese, you really want to see the guys who are in formation wearing collars in the picture, because that's a good indication of guys who are going to be ordained. Because with guys in the discipleship, their college program, many of those men don't go on. They'll maybe get the degree at college and then go find other studies, maybe get married, whatever, and good, right? So the purpose of seminary is to find your vocation, and men do that. Plus, they're being formed to be good men. So good, good Catholic men. That's what we need, right? So awesome. Just as like in my own experience, when we started in seminary, I believe there were 13 men from St. Louis in my class when I started. Between the college and our pre-theology program, we had 13 men from St. Louis. Of those 13, original 13, because we had some guys come into our class from a class above because they went, whatever. There's only 5 of us, right? So that's not a great, attrition rate, right? So like a lot more men leave the seminary than stay. Mm-hmm. And good, it's still a good thing. But when we talk about priestly vocations, that's kind of alarming, right? As a matter of fact, there was a stat put out by the vocations office recently that said that at our current rate, because we get about 7 guys into the seminary. I'm sorry, we get about 10 guys in the seminary every year. We need to have 7 enter the seminary every year for the next 10 years just to maintain our current number. So, okay, we're getting 10. That's not bad. We would need 15 a year to enter the seminary to maintain our pre-COVID numbers. So that's a little more scary in some ways. But also that's assuming, I think they're assuming that a portion of those men are not going to go all the way through either. If you look at it like the general, in St. Louis general landscape, to put that in perspective, we ordain on average maybe 3 a year, but we end up losing 10 a year to death or retirement. So if you're looking at that, that's not really a good ratio. We're losing about net 7 every year. And this year we're actually losing, well, maybe, I don't think we're having as many retire. We already had 1 pass away. So that's 6, and we're only ordaining 1. So it's like, oh, that's okay. Well, that's better than previous years, but also that trend you don't want to really, keep up. You'd rather those numbers go the opposite way, right? So yeah, you have to take it over. I mean, and Father Ritter's doing a great job. He's trying. I think he would say that the vocation director actually is more the pastor than the vocation director, and that's true. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's also interesting too that there was a time a few years ago when I was in the seminary. Before I entered the seminary, they were asking, they were saying something like every parish were able to foster 2 seminarians over the course of a decade. The priestly formation, the priestly crisis would be resolved. What's rather ironic about that is that my home parish, Immaculate Heart of Mary, actually had 2 men go to the seminary and get ordained, and they've been subsumed. So they're no longer a parish anymore. So I don't know. I mean, whatever. These trends, these predictions, who knows?
Yeah, that would change the numbers because of there being less parishes putting people forward.
Right. Well, the idea was not necessarily it shows a healthy parish, although that is a good key indicator. It's that the priestly, like you have a priest to sustain the current population and not have to do multiple ministries, that kind of thing. But I think it's funny that our parish upheld the bargain, but what was their reward?
Yeah.
While they're so, yeah.
Thanks for playing.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, good.
I guess that's part of the reason why they're pushing lay ministry.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's because we just don't have enough priests to cover everything. That's kind of a big discussion in the Curia because the mindset would be, and I think there's some truth in this. If there's not a priest involved in the ministry in the Curia, that's usually not a good sign.
What's the Curia?
The Curia is the kind of like the they're all like the archdiocesan offices.
Okay.
So they're basically the archbishop's staff,
Okay.
right? That run things. So different ministries like Respect Life, immigration, outreach, all that kind of. So all these different ministries are happening within the Cardinal Regali Center. That's all considered to be the Curia, right? Even actually, seminary faculty are considered to be Curia as well, right? So technically, I'm a member of the Curia because I'm the spiritual director. I sit on the board for the Respect Life Apostolate. So that's a ministry. It probably takes maybe about 7 hours a month for me, maybe more depending on the month. But it's still kind of like part of my ministry, right? But the question there is are there priests involved with your ministry? And if they're not, that's usually not a good sign of the future of your ministry.
Right.
So I don't know. I don't know if that's true, but yeah.
How are so when this was an early parish and it was serviced by the Jesuits,
right,
by horseback. So obviously there was not a Jesuit here, and I mean, you look at the church of that era
Mm-hmm.
and you think about the church of this era,
Mm-hmm.
and it seems like there must have been just huge changes as far as what they envision goes on at a parish.
Yeah, I mean, so I think back when this was founded, this area was just kind of more being developed, right? So it was still mostly farmland, right? I mean, if you think about the size of the parish when it was initially founded, I mean, you're talking about, you know, all the way out to like St. Charles. I mean, when you think about like the history of the archdiocese,
Yeah.
St. Anne was a mother parish
Yeah.
for many of the parishes heading west of us,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, it's huge space of land. Now the question is how many people,
Mhm.
right? Definitely not as many as there are now. I think you can definitely say that, which is why maybe it was looked on as more mission territory, even though the parish was established because it was run by an order. Well, part of that is the challenge is like we can't necessarily have a priest, like you're saying, stay out in that boundary
Mhm.
because they're part of this order. They have to be
Right.
in community. They have to do these other things that are required of them in that order. Even when it was handed over to the Passionists, I think that was still the same thing. That this kind of the structure here was kind of developed to actually be more of a communal location that Passionists could live here in community and still maintain their obligations as a Passionist.
Mhm.
Um, the more this may sound cynical, but the more I kind of be involved with Curial and even as a pastor, the more I start to question whether there's a plan at all, right? And so I don't know if that was any different back then. I
Yeah.
think it was just like, hey, we have gathering people in this spot. Okay, we probably should establish a parish
Right.
because we have a lot of Catholics gathered there. Okay, let's do that.
Mhm.
And in some ways, that's kind of a tradition of the church too. That many times the lay faithful are the ones that kind of direct how the church goes, not just in like governance and boundary, but even in like things like dogmatic decrees. So it wouldn't be unreasonable for pastors, bishops, when they're looking at a particular issue, to look at the laity how they're actually handle it in their own houses and families, or what their beliefs are about it. Again, that needs to be weighed against, the teaching of Christ, the apostles, and also because there could be outliers, of course, but also that was the assumption that people actually knew the faith, right? That, your average layperson probably would know the faith better 100 years ago than today.
Yeah.
And again, I don't know where the disconnect was in that or how that, kind of changed over time. There may be many different factors in that. But that was kind of a source of like, okay, well, how's the Holy Spirit guiding us? Well, what is he doing in the laity already? How's he guiding them? And that'd be a question I think that they would ask at ecumenical councils, like, what is laity in your diocese? How are they living this? And that would kind of dictate how the dogmatic decree would go. That's always been kind of a history of a tradition of the church, to look at the laity first and see how they're living those things.
Mhm.
I think what happens though is, I'm sure there's also, again, ways that were lived well and ways that were lived not within what the church would teach, or not within what was handed down by the apostles. And so those would have to be kind of weighed and be like, okay, we need to reject these. So yeah, I think that's kind of how it's always been. I think the only thing that's really changed over time is maybe the number of issues, but also people's attitudes toward them. I mean, today, if you had an ecumenical council today, you kind of would ask, like, what would be the issues they would look at to maybe make dogmatic proclamations that they may have been already. I mean, I think part of that would be looking at the family and marriage and what that actually is. And if not, re-decree what the church already teaches, but maybe go in certain extremes and more discussion about, what it means to be living a married life, what that entails. What are the requirements for, not those requirements, but what is the matter, the form, right, of a valid marriage? What makes a valid marriage? I think there might be more clarity But yeah, I don't know. I mean, that'd be interesting to kind of look at.
Mhm.
I mean, again, I think that's also sometimes how Satan tries to overcome is he attacks the building blocks of society, which would be the family.
Mhm.
And so it might behoove the church, if they were going to have an ecumenical council, to reinstate or decree what the church's stance on those things. And I think the struggle would be you might turn people away in that. You might cause people to actually like walk away from the church because of those teachings. And I think that's where you have to be strong in your leadership to say, I can't change this,
Right.
right? I can't change what the church teaches on family and marriage.
No. Yeah. Well, you wonder, I wonder about this, you get to your exit interview with God and, you say, I don't know you,
Yeah.
And it's like, well,
Yeah.
So if you as a church are just going, hey, let's just all get along, and let's be friends, and let's not push anybody away.
Mm-hmm.
But then you get to the end of their life and they go, well, he blew it.
Yeah. I mean, and I think the struggle there too is like, even for those who, let's say, if I'm given a pastoral approach to somebody who is struggling with a particular teaching, I think the way that you would handle that pastorally is meet them where they are, try to understand like what is our common, what's common with what you're saying and what the church does teach, right?
Mhm.
So maybe for someone who's struggling with, let's say, same-sex attraction, how that applies to marriage, right? So, hey, look, I experience same-sex attraction. I have the attraction to my partner. We're of the same sex, but I really care for this person. I love this person, and I want the best things for that person. Good. Good. That's a good place to start. That's what the church wants for everybody, is to be loved, to will the good of another.
Mhm.
Now we have to start getting into more definitions and discussions about what does that mean, right? What does that entail? What is the responsibility in that? Because the love I have for, let's say, a friend of mine might be similar to that. I want the good for that person. I will love that person genuinely. I want the best things for that person. I'm even willing to lay down my life for that person and sacrifice for that person. That doesn't mean I can engage in actions that are violation of their proper end, right? So in other words, I may even want to have that person touch me in some way, right? Or would it be like a hug, a handshake, a kiss, which is a great expression of love. But that's different than a marital couple and what they are called to do in that life,
Mhm.
right? That we would even say that's really a contradiction in terms of what marriage actually is.
Mhm.
To say that because I love this person genuinely and want the best things for them, that's equivalent to a marriage. We'd have to say, no, that's not what a marriage actually is, because a marriage has a particular purpose and particular end.
Mhm.
That even though I may want to get that other person to heaven, which is an aspect of married life,
Mhm.
right? The role and the responsibility of a married person is to get their spouse to heaven. I may want that I want to do that for my friend, but the way I do that would be different than a married person, and it should be, and it needs to be, right? So yeah, I think that's the thing, is like meeting where I was like, hey, I think that's great that you have this great love for your partner. That's good. There's something holy there. But what are the consequences? What are the effects of that?
Mhm.
Right? What are the limitations of that? I think it's important to have those discussions. And the problem there too is that, not necessarily the problem, but the struggle and the frustration there is that will take time. Because as a pastor of souls, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to meet you where you are, but I can't leave you there.
Right.
And the problem with that is that takes time to actually have someone understand, well, here's what the church, and here's why. And here's maybe why that you should reflect on how that applies to you.
Mhm.
Because that's really the hardest part, is the self-inspection. It's like, okay, if this is something that we're all called to, what's stopping me from actually desiring that? Or what's stopping me from actually engaging in that? Right? And that's at the heart of everybody. Anyone who struggled with sin or temptation is called to do the same thing. I think the problem we reflect, we see those that we don't want to do it. Because in some way too, this is a truth as well. We tend to love the sin.
Yeah.
There's otherwise we wouldn't do these things,
Sure.
right? We
Right.
wouldn't do them.
Yeah.
So part of that requires a self inspection too, to say, well, why am I desiring that over something that could be potentially better for me? Or more importantly, why is that better for me?
Mhm.
Right? I think that's where the struggle lies.
Mhm.
And that's what takes the most time to understand that why, and the realization and the experience of, oh, this is what is best for me. And even in the midst of that, okay, but I'm still stuck in this habit. How do I overcome that? Right? That's oftentimes where the struggle lies.
Mhm.
And that's where the frustration is, because we want it now. I want you to go to heaven. Here's how you're going to do it. I know you're going to get there. I know what you have to do to get there. I want you to do that. But the problem is I can't force you.
Mhm.
I can't even really yell at you about it. I can just, all I can do is offer it.
Yeah.
And provide you with what Jesus teaches us. That's it. Right. And I can pray for you. And that's probably the best thing I can do,
Yeah.
which again also takes time. But I mean, also, I think it's important to recognize as well that usually when people are coming to you for those things, they're doing that for a reason too.
Mhm.
Maybe some might argue that's to be validated. But if you're coming to a Catholic priest, I would imagine that's not what you're seeking.
Right.
Right. So,
Right.
in other words, my role would be different maybe than the layperson's role. But also, I think what we have to understand as lay people is that oftentimes our interaction, our role is probably more evangelistic and actually more important than the priest role in that regard.
Yeah, you would hate to give somebody bad advice.
Mhm.
No, and when it becomes part of your family, it becomes even more difficult. 'Cause
Oh, sure.
You know then that, okay, they,
Yeah.
there's all kinds of people in this family. They want you
Mhm.
to say there's nothing wrong here.
Right.
And if you don't say that, you're not a loving person.
Yeah. Yeah.
Matter of fact, you might be an evil person.
Yeah.
In their minds.
Yeah. We
I mean, you're a hater, and and it's like, well, if I tell you that everything is okay, and then that individual goes to hell for eternity, I don't think that's really being loving, but you
Right.
think that's being loving.
Well, not only that, I think it's even worse is the fact that, well, you may not go to hell for this because you have no reason to doubt it. I'm the one that's affirming you.
Yeah.
The one's really going to hell will be me.
Yeah, I had a chance.
Because there's something I worked against my conscience.
Yeah.
I didn't love you enough to give you the truth.
Right.
And I think that's something we need to kind of wrestle with and understand, is that our role. I mean, this is something that in my own family, I've talked about this too. In our family, we called it love me, love my dog. So what that would mean is, in order to actually love someone fully, you have to love everything about them, including their dog. Now, I might not like the dog, but I still love the person, right? But because of that lack of love for the dog, that can be turned against me. Well, why don't you love my dog? I love my dog.
Yeah.
And you can understand that from a rational standpoint. It's like, well, I love this. Why wouldn't you love this?
Yeah.
Right? Because if you love me, you would love this. That's not actually logical, though.
No.
Right? So,
It's like when I hear people say, okay, I looked at the world this way
Mhm.
once upon a time.
Mhm.
And then I had a fill in the blank, a daughter, a son, a brother, a
Sure.
sister, go this route. Now I look at the world totally different. And I'd be like, okay, so like if that daughter or son, brother or sister, if they started stealing cars, and that's all they did was
Mhm.
steal cars, and they got arrested and put in prison, I would expect you to fully love that person.
Sure.
But I wouldn't expect you to say, it's okay to steal cars.
Yeah, that was okay.
Because
Hey.
my brother does
Right.
it.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And so if my brother does it
Yeah.
and I love my brother, it must be okay.
Yeah.
It's just,
I mean, and then there's also a limitation to that too. Like, I can understand if someone was raised in a family where their parents made a living off stealing cars, and that's how they provide their family, and you then follow that suit because
Yeah.
you're okay. Again, I can understand that,
Right.
but I think the difference is I wouldn't condone it still.
Right.
And I think that's kind of I think the main difference. Like, and just kind of play that out in my family. I mean, I have siblings who are not having their children baptized. And as a priest, it's hard for me to see that,
No.
not only as a priest, but as a brother. because I know what baptism is. I know what the good that it is. And then now a lot of discussion comes down to, well, I don't want to force it on them that they wouldn't. I want them to decide for themselves. And it's like, and you think about that though, is I can understand that argument if you were providing other alternatives. So in other words, if you were taking these children to, let's say, a Hindu temple or a Buddhist temple or to a Jewish synagogue or to a mosque and even like a non-denominational church or a Baptist church, these other places, and then also take them to a Catholic church and let them see all the different options that are out there to choose from, I would say, you know what? Okay, at least you're taking those steps to show them what's there, but you're not. And so what option are you giving your children if you're not providing those options at all? But the problem with that is I can't have that conversation because not only am I the older brother, I'm also the priest. And so in that regard, love me, love my dog becomes much more not about the dog, it's about the you, right? And my prayer then becomes, I pray that someone comes in their life that can lead them to the truth. Because I know it's not going to be me. And that's also hard too, because I'd like it to be me, but it's not going to be me. It's not even going to be my parents, probably. It'll probably be anyone in our family. It's probably going to be someone outside of the family, which, okay, that's God working still. I'm just praying that it happens.
Right.
I hope it happens before I die.
Yeah.
But that's kind of where we have to be at, I think, sometimes.
Yeah.
In this case, it's more, I do love your dog, and I want the best things for your dog. Or in this case, your children. I'm not saying that, but that's the thing. I want that for you.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, it can be hard. It can be hard.
Well, my mom had a phrase that would come out sometimes. I always love you. Sometimes it's hard to like you.
Oh yeah, I use it all the time. I love you, but I don't like you. Yeah, that's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's okay to say because I can still love you and lay down my life for you, but I don't have to like you. I want to hang out and get a beer with you maybe all the time. Right. So yeah, I think that's perfectly fine. Like and love are two different things. And sometimes it's easier to love than like. I mean, I think that's kind of true. I mean, it's much easier sometimes to love than like. Yeah. Well, good. Wow, we covered a lot of topics I know, even though we didn't have anything coming in. Well, good. All right. Well, next week is Friends, Food, and Faith. So it's the first of the month. So, boy, I don't know. You guys have any ideas you want to talk? Anything you want to talk about specifically? I mean, it is the month of Mary. I guess we'll get that. I mean, I was thinking also looking at like a deep dive of holy orders, being that we have ordinations in May. So maybe we can talk about that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sounds good.
All right. So
All right,
ordination. We'll talk about that on next Tuesday. God bless.
Thank you, Father Mark.
David, anytime. Thanks for the books.